In this video, I will discuss smart research strategies to help you as you begin your research paper, which is the last paper that you will write for our course. This quote is from Zora Neale Hurston, and it talks about research being formalized curiosity. So really just poking and prying with a purpose. You already have a purpose because in this assignment, you will take what you've written in essay number 3 and expand that into your research paper. But I've included in this video information about how you can start from scratch, because in other courses that you take later in your college career, you may be tasked with writing a research paper where you don't have a topic at all to begin with. So we're going to go through some of the steps designed to help you come up with a topic that's manageable. The first thing you want to do is be sure that you really know your assignment well. And for our specific assignment, you're required to include a minimum of 7 sources. These are 7 different separate sources. You're limited to 2 personal interviews. One of your sources must be an academic journal article. However, you may include any other relevant sources such as interviews, and like I mentioned, you're limited to 2 interviews, personal interviews anyway. You could have other interviews that are formalized, and films, etc. If you're unsure about a source's reliability or if it's okay to use for the research paper, please let me know, and I'm happy to discuss any of the sources that may seem questionable to you in more detail. You also want to keep in mind that research takes a lot of time, so you don't want to procrastinate. I suggest creating a plan which includes preparing a calendar with specific tasks to complete on specific dates. So, of course, you have our specific assignments for our course, but you can break that down even more detailed if you need that type of detail to stay on task. But you want to make your plan simple so it's manageable and you don't feel overwhelmed with the goals or the tasks that you've set for yourself. The most important thing is that you have due dates recorded somewhere that will help you remember when assignments are due, especially at the end of the semester. If you're taking other courses, things tend to pile up a little bit and become sometimes a little bit stressful, so creating a plan will help with managing, at least for our class, this last assignment. When you are just beginning and you're trying to find a topic, you want to make sure that your topic is manageable. And because our assignment for this class is a debatable topic, because you're writing an argumentative research paper, you want to make sure your topic is debatable. So that means that not everyone is going to agree or have the same opinion about the topic that you choose to explore. You want to find something that is interesting to you, and like I mentioned in essay number 3, if you can find something to write about that you're actually passionate about, that will make the entire experience more enjoyable to you. You want to make sure that the topic is within the scope of the assignment. It may seem long to you, but a 7 to 10 page paper is actually really short for a research paper. So you don't want to bite off a topic that is going to be too broad or too difficult to write about within 7 to 10 pages. You want to make sure that you have enough time to do your research. So again, if something is really new to you and you know nothing about it and it's a bit complex, that might be a topic that you want to use later for another course or to explore in your own time, given that we have a relatively short amount of time left in the semester to complete this assignment. And you also want to make sure that you have enough resources to work with for your specific topic. So once you choose a topic, it's important to narrow the focus of your topic, because if it's too general, then you're going to have a hard time focusing on meeting the assignment requirements, because if a topic's really general, then you could write a book or multiple books about that topic. So you want to pick a specific aspect about a topic and focus on that. So you're going to try to break off a small but interesting part of a much larger subject and focus on that part of your subject or topic. Here are some examples of topics that are way too broad. So if you were going to choose something, for example, about Hawaiian culture, you need to choose something much more specific related to this topic and just write about that specifically. To try to do this, to try to narrow your topic, at first you want to read broadly and then try to narrow the general subject. You can do this by brainstorming to develop focused questions to ask in your preliminary research. As you do research, this can also help you narrow the focus of your topic. And then try turning the topic idea into the topic into an idea or a phrase, into a claim that is a complete sentence. And that will later evolve into your thesis statement to see if you have something that really you can work with and you can narrow into a thesis statement. You can also try brainstorming, so writing any ideas that pop into your mind about a topic, and then later exploring those ideas by evaluating the list of ideas that you made in your brainstorming list, looking for parallels, and identifying the most important ideas from your list. So maybe narrowing it down to 3 or 5 ideas. And then try to create a thesis statement based on this information to see if you have something that you think is workable for the assignment. The next thing you want to do in your research as you're gathering sources is distinguish between primary and secondary sources. A primary source provides an eyewitness account of an event or a phenomenon, and it is the original source material. That's why it's referred to as primary. Secondary sources, on the other hand, consist of an article or a book that interprets or reports on events or phenomenon described in a primary source. So it's not like a first-hand account, which is the primary source, but it's an interpretation of a primary source, and that's why it's called a secondary source. So you want to keep that in mind as you're evaluating sources. Are they primary or are they secondary sources? And then ask yourself, based on your topic, is it important to include more primary or secondary sources, or is it okay to have a mix? You want to make sure that you're accurately recording every source you encounter, so later, if you decide to use a source that you looked at, you have all the information. I know sometimes it's easy to grab a quote or an idea, write it down on paper, or copy and paste it into your paper without also including the source information. So you want to be sure that you have an accurate list of all the source information you need in case you do use a paraphrase or quote from a source. That way you can include an accurate in-text citation and an accurate entry in your works cited page. So you can review what you need to include. You've been making works cited pages already for your papers, but of course you need authors, editors, translators, sponsors, any of this that applies or is applicable, other major contributors, titles, subtitles, edition numbers, volumes, all the publication information, page numbers, URLs, electronic pathways, or other locations. And there are a lot of ways to organize this type of information online, or you could just do it on paper. This week you will create the topic proposal for your research paper. In your topic proposal, you want to include your topic idea, your draft thesis. I say draft because this could change as you do research. You may find you need to go back and make changes to your thesis. Your major areas of support. So these are the general ideas that you plan to explore and then to flesh out in your paper. Research questions to answer that will help you in this area with your support, and a list of potential sources. So for the potential sources, you can just make a list of the information that you would include in a works cited entry. And a little bit more information about looking for your sources, since you do need to include a list of potential sources. And I suggest that you start with the sources that you used for essay number 3. You may use all of those. If you need to add sources, that's absolutely fine. If you find better sources, that's good too. But you don't need to completely start over, because you do have the sources that you found for essay number 3 as a starting point. So as you're doing research, it's important to learn how to navigate the library catalog. Our catalog is LibCat. You did have a brief lesson a while back about navigating the library, but it was brief, and this just takes a lot of time and practice to be able to, quickly locate information. I still have trouble sometimes finding information, and I still ask for help from our reference librarians quite frequently. So it's a good idea to know how to use LibCat, how to locate research guides, and to be familiar with the different online databases that are available to you as students. I included a link that hopefully you looked at already when we did talk about the library and how to access information remotely from our library. The library is open too, so you can go in person. But what I wanted to point out to you is that if you didn't look already, there's this link to subject research guides that you might find useful. So it has different links within this page. It has specific subjects that you can quickly click on to find more information about, and then just some general ideas that you need to consider. Some that I already mentioned, like research taking time and effort, and oftentimes you're going to have to go through multiple databases. You're not just going to find all the best sources in one place. So it really is a matter of putting some real time and effort into your research if you want to find the best sources. And you're not, by the way, limited to only using sources from our library, but if you're worried about the reliability of sources, I know some of you have mentioned that you're concerned about using online sources because anyone out there in the universe can post pretty much whatever they want online, and that is a really valid concern. So if you are using sources from outside the library, you need to be extra careful about deciding whether or not the source is a valid source that you should be including in your research paper. And again, if you have questions, please let me know. I'm happy to meet with you and talk about any sources that you might find questionable. And as a note too, even though a source is located within the library's databases, you still have to be discerning. You still have to consider if the source is really a good fit for your topic, and if it's from a newspaper, for example, how reliable really is that source? If it's from an academic journal, it's most likely going to be much more reliable than something from a newspaper. And a little bit more about evaluating sources. We did talk about this before, but it's always good to talk about this again. So you always want to think about, in your preview of your sources, who published or produced the source, for what reason and what purpose, who wrote the work, and again, for what reason, for what purpose. Is the author or are the authors subject matter experts? You might have to do a little research about them to determine if they really are credible to discuss the topic. Consider the audience for the source. So what specific audience do you think that source was geared to, and how may that present biases potentially? And then establish how current the source is or not. Depending on your topic, you may really need to have more current sources. And then check for documentation. If you're looking at a source and there's no documentation, you can't tell who the author is, you can't tell when it was published or who published it, it's probably not a good source to use for your research paper. You want to read all sources critically to identify the claims. So you're looking at the arguments, any assumptions, and of course the evidence used to support the claims and assumptions. And then to better understand the information in a source, try annotating it. So writing right on the source or taking notes, you can do this online as well. This is helpful, especially when you are looking at multiple sources, then you have notes to look at later to go back when you're writing the drafts of your paper. You can try using a summary to recap. Oftentimes, a source, like if it's an academic journal, it will have an abstract, so that's a good way to go back and summarize. And it's also a good way to just get an idea overall about a source. Do you really want to take the time and energy to read through something? Read the abstract first, and it will give you a good idea about the content of the material. You want to make sure your source is accurate and complete. Make a note if it might or might not contribute to your paper. And your summaries are going to also become very useful to you when you write your annotated bibliography. And of course, again, you want to include a record, an accurate record of all source information, so you can use that later if needed. I just have a brief amount of information about annotated bibliographies because next week's lesson is dedicated entirely to annotated bibliographies. But you will be creating an annotated bibliography in addition to your research paper. And an annotated bibliography is an alphabetical list of research materials followed by a summary and evaluation of each item. So you'll have your works cited page as normal, but after the entry, you will have a summary, a brief summary of the source, including about a sentence or two that evaluates the usefulness of the source related to your topic and your research. So again, next week, I will talk more about creating an annotated bibliography. Until then, if you have any questions or you need any help tackling the topic proposal, please let me know. I'm always happy to meet with you and help out the best I can. Thank you.